In this video, I'm going to be going over how to identify members of order Perissodactyla and order Cetartiodactyla. So in Perissodactyla, over here we just have one family, Equidae, the horses, and Equus the horse. Horses are not in your key, but because of Mustangs, feral horses, wild horses, etc., whatever you want to call them, they're probably worth knowing, and the skulls are very distinctive, so this should be pretty easy. I'll get to the skulls in a second. Over in Cetartiodactyla, these are our even-toed ungulates in Montana because we don't have any cetaceans, we don't have any whales or dolphins in Montana. We have pronghorn, and then in the deer, we have our moose, elk, mule deer, white-tailed deer. Family Bovidae, we have mountain goat, bighorn sheep, bison, and we're comparing the bison to the domestic cow. You should be familiar with a lot of these species, so hopefully that makes it easier. Now, all of these notes will be posted online, so I'm not going to stand here and point them out. Instead, I'm going to walk around to the different specimens and go over how to identify them. Starting with the horse. So, over here, we have a horse. The most distinguished thing about a horse versus other ungulates is that it has upper incisors. If we look at, say, this elk skull right next to it, no upper incisors, just this flat plate. If you look at any goat, sheep, cow, none of them have these upper incisors. Beyond that, I think that just the shape and size of the skull is rather distinctive. It has this huge angular process. So I'm confident that you'll be able to figure out this one. So then moving on to order Cetartiodactyla, we have our pronghorn over here, only member of family Ankylocapridae. With pronghorn are unique in that they have horns, so they don't have antlers where the bone falls off, but they have these sheaths, and the sheaths do come off and regrow every year. The sheaths are made of keratin, they're not made of bone, it's just the outside. If we look at this bony sheath though, what we can see that's different than other horned animals is that it's really flat, so it's kind of vertically compressed, and it's pointing straight up. So if we look at a female here, female also have horns, much smaller. You can see them pointing straight up, and you can see how flat they are. They also just have these really big, massive eye sockets sticking out to the sides. So that's a pronghorn. We have a pronghorn skin here. Very distinctive coloration with kind of orangish above, white below with the stripes on the neck and the black pattern on the face, really distinctive. So then we're going to talk about family Cervidae. So these are the deer. I should point out one thing that kind of all deer skulls have that I don't exactly know the term for is they have, might be fenestration, these little weird holy things right in front of the eye. If you look at, say, a mountain goat, it doesn't have it. So if you know what a deer skull looks like, then great, you know that it's a deer skull. If not, that's one thing that can kind of help you out. So we have 4 species of deer in Montana: moose, elk, mule deer, white-tailed deer. Starting with the moose, massive skull, bigger than a whitetail, right? And it has this depression on the top of the skull, so you can see that big indentation. That's key that it's a moose. Compared to this elk here, which is also a large skull but doesn't have that deep indentation. elk then, the thing about elk that's distinctive is that they have canines, upper canines. Here, the canines have fallen out or someone took them as a trophy. You may have heard of elk ivory. Those are the upper canines. But you can see the holes where the canines were. Compared to, say, the moose skull, you don't see anything like that. So moose, no canines, elk has canines. Now the antlers of moose and elk are very distinctive. Here's an elk here. If you don't know what an elk antler looks like, you probably haven't spent enough time in Montana. They're everywhere. And the moose has this flat plate, but females don't have antlers, and even males that have antlers don't have them most of the year, so it's important to know what the skulls look like without the antlers. Last thing about elk and moose is we don't have any skins of these. You would probably recognize the skin if you saw it, but we don't have them, so those won't be on the exam. Okay, last two deer we have then are mule deer and white-tailed deer. So for the skulls, if you have the antlers, it's very obvious. Here, this mule deer I have has this forked pattern of tines. So on the antlers, it splits and then splits. If you look at the mule deer, sorry, the white-tailed deer, this is the white-tailed deer. There's one main axis, and then all of the other tines are pointing off of that main axis. What happens if you don't have an antler then? So let's think about this. So first of all, I know it's a deer. I know that it's too small to be a moose, plus it doesn't have the big indentation. I know it's too small to be an elk, plus it's missing those upper incisors, upper canines. So it's a white-tailed or mule deer. What we're looking at is the lacrimal fossa. So you may remember that the lacrimal bone is this little bone right in front of the eye. And for the lacrimal fossa, I'm talking about that indentation right there. You can see how deep that goes in there compared to this whitetail, where it's a very shallow indentation. So here they are kind of stacked one against each other. So you can see the mule deer has the deep lacrimal fossa and the whitetail has the shallow. And that is the best way to tell apart the skulls if you don't have antlers, which again, for most of the time, an animal will be female and never have antlers, or male and doesn't have it for a lot of the year. Looking at the skins then, we have our whitetail with the white tail on the underside. You've probably seen this white underside a lot in the deer around town. Mule deer has black tail tip. Mule deer, also called black-tailed deer, are a subspecies of mule deer, so black tail. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about for the white-tailed mule deer skins is the metatarsal gland. So if we're looking at the back leg, you can see a little gland with a kind of different hair around it that is very short in this white-tailed deer, and it's this long in the mule deer. So the tails are distinctive. This is another difference that is worth knowing. Okay, so that just leaves family Bovidae. Bovidae are cow, sheep, goats, and wild relatives, and antelope. African and Asian antelope, not pronghorn antelope. Okay, everything in this group has horns, meaning that it has this bony core that doesn't fall off, and this keratin sheath, which unlike the pronghorn, stays on for its entire life, can fall off in death. So we have our bighorn sheep here. See the horns, males and females both have horns. If it has the sheaths, they're pretty distinctive with all these ridges. one thing to note about this versus the mountain goat that I'll get to in a second is here, if you look at the horns, this is a little bit more triangular shaped. It's not as round. It's a little flatter. But unlike the pronghorn, they're pointing back, not straight up. So you won't get this confused with the pronghorn horn sticking right up. I have a skin here for our lovely sheep with this kind of light tannish color. For our mountain goats over here, we see the horns. We see that they're pointing backwards, not up like the pronghorn. We see that they're very round. And if it happens to still have the sheath attached, then we see that they're smooth and darker color and different than the sheep. Here we have a nice white, very white mountain goat. So all that leaves then are our bison and our cow, which we have over here. Now we don't have any skins for the bison and the cow, but I'm sure you all could recognize a bison. Oh, we do have a bison skin right here. We don't have a cow, but everyone should know what a cow looks like. The skulls here are very similar. You've probably seen skulls like this hanging up in bars around town or wherever. The biggest difference between the bison and the cow skull is looking at these two bones here. So this is our premaxilla, this is our nasal bone, and here in this bison, they don't touch. Here in this cow, we see this premaxilla extending all the way back up and touching this nasal bone. So that distinguishes our bison and cow. And that should do it for order Perissodactyla, the horse, and order Cetartiodactyla, all our other ungulates.